here representing two different communities. One community, all right, is Susan Wolf and Tom Rothschild. They came from Ithaca and New York City, right?
Right.
So take it away. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. So we're going to take a slightly different approach. Susan and I are both members of a committee of New York yearly meeting of Quakers called the Indian Affairs Committee. And we know that probably most of you are not as familiar with Quakers as you are, say, with Episcopals or with the Catholic Church. So just a few words about who we are and who we can speak for and who we cannot. Quakers divide themselves into groups called yearly meetings, which typically cover a relatively small area. We, for instance, are New York yearly meeting, which is slightly larger than the state of New York, but not much. So Quakers cannot act universally. There is no hierarchy, there is no ultimate authority that has the right to speak for all Quakers. And so when we speak, we're going to tell you about, or Susan is going to tell you about, some of the Quaker yearly meetings and local monthly meetings or churches that have adopted a minute, that's how we term things, on repudiation of the doctrine of discovery. So that happens yearly meeting by yearly meeting, and usually it starts at one or two local monthly meetings. Butternuts in New York was one of the early monthly meetings to speak on this. And we also have a process for making decisions that is rather different. We act on the basis of unity, which we sometimes call sense of the meeting. And that means the whole group acting together. So we never have a close vote. If we have a close vote, something is not approved. We act when the whole meeting is in unity. And then we feel that we are carrying forward what God or the Divine Spirit, or whatever words you wish to use, empowers us to do. So typically, it takes a while. By the time we act, everybody who is there is familiar with the doctrine of discovery, even if they were not a year or two before. And so it took us a few years to act, but we have acted. And New York yearly meeting and several other yearly meetings have adopted minutes on the doctrine of discovery. And going forward, certainly we need to look how to move forward. One of the advantages of having all our different yearly meetings is that we can connect with, work with, support, be allies for indigenous nations and indigenous peoples in the area in which our yearly meetings are located. And so we here in New York yearly meeting have tried to connect with, and will continue to try to connect with and support particularly the Haudenosaunee, although not exclusively, and other native nations and peoples. And we want to act in a way that will be supportive of those initiatives. That doesn't mean we depend on such people, on such nations for our actions. But we want to be sure that we are being consistent and that we are being helpful. So maybe that's enough for me. Susan has our minute, which she can read, and between us we will speak about some of the other yearly meetings that have also adopted minutes, although we don't have those here with us to read at the moment.
Well, we have some of them.
We have some of them, but we don't want to spend too much time reading.
What we have over there is a small display, and in that display there's a book, and in the book there are several of the minutes. She needs to see
She
me.
needs to see. I want to make sure everyone else can hear you.
Well, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right.
Good.
Several of the minutes that were written by different Quaker groups. This one says, I'm just going to give this to you later. We seek to live in a just peace with our fellow human beings, both as individuals and as peoples. The United States has formally declared its support for the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples of 2007. We now call on the United States Senate to enact the legislation that will make this the law of the land in the United States of America. We repudiate the doctrine of discovery, which originated in the 15th century from papal bulls and European royal charters issued at that time. The doctrine of discovery mandated the seizure of lands belonging to any non-Christian peoples and encouraged the enslavement, exploitation, or eradication of those peoples. We cannot accept that the doctrine of discovery was ever a true authority for the forced takings of lands and the enslavement or extermination of peoples. It is reprehensible for the United States to use the doctrine of discovery as a legal doctrine to compel a jurisdiction over indigenous peoples or their lands. We honor the inalienable rights of indigenous peoples to their homelands, water, spiritual practices, languages, cultural practices, and to self-government, all of which sustain life and the life of a people and the autonomy of indigenous peoples. An indigenous people has the right to make decisions and establish constructive arrangements with other nations, governments, and peoples on their own behalf. Another group might word it a little differently, but the idea is mostly the same. And I would like to say a little bit about our committee. It's an old committee. It started in the 1790s. And it's had many different, evolutions over the years. And about 15 years ago, the efforts were very scattered and not focused well. So today we are trying to work within our geographic area, and whatever work we do, we look to the nation that we're working with for their guidance and their input. We don't come and say, okay, here, this is what you should do this and this and this. We come and say, we're here to help. How can we help? And so looking forward, we would like more input from the nations to know how to best do that. And some exact things that we could do. We heard some things this morning, but more, because when we go home, Tom will go to New York, I'll go to Ithaca and other people. People say, well, what can we do? And we would like some specific things to tell them, to say, oh, well, stand in support. Well, how? What exactly to do? So, that's it.
Very good. Very good insights. Thank you. Sure.
We've had some, in the past when they were making treaties, there was the Friends who had always been there, trying to make sure that we weren't swindled or lied to. How did that relationship start? Do you have any history on that? How that came about? You want to speak to that?
It's a long story, and it has its ins and outs, because it is also true, for instance, that there were Quakers involved to some extent in the boarding schools. So I don't want to claim as though we have, always been clear and helpful. But Susan can maybe tell you more of the history. Between us, we'll try to answer your question as best we can.
Well, I would say it started with William Penn, who unfortunately got his land through the doctrine of discovery. But when he came, he was the first person to sort of say, well, here's a sovereign people, and we need to sit down with them and make an agreement that is, like Quaker process, agreeable to both of us, or all of us. New York came later, I think, and partly Quakers have been strongly involved in social justice over the years, and so when looking at the situation, I think many times they were called upon to be impartial witnesses to what was going on. And when something was happening, with the weight, say, on the side of the government to say, no, wait, here, this is a side that needs to be represented. And exactly how each of those things came about, I don't know. But I know that one of the roles was as impartial witness, and because Quakers don't involve themselves in war, they often are seen as kind of like a neutral body, because they don't fight on this side, they don't fight on this side, so I don't know, does that help to answer?
And maybe I could give some more detail later if you want to have a conversation, and there's a lot written about it.
Great. Thank you.